I come from Australia, where I'm a full-time clinical doctor, and it's the land of e-cigarette prohibition. They often try and make e-cigarettes synonymous with the tobacco industry. Did you know that in Australia, the possession of e-liquid with nicotine in it for use in e-cigarettes is punishable with the same penalties as apply to the possession of heroin? I first became interested in e-cigarettes when some of the most hardened smokers in my clinic started giving up by using them. I became fascinated by the idea of turning the whole quitting paradigm on its head. Instead of being about withdrawal and denial, it became something about excitement and enjoyment of something better. Who ever knew that quitting could be fun? To my dismay, most people in tobacco control in Australia didn't share my excitement. In fact, they seemed disgusted and offended that people could enjoy recreational nicotine without the threat of death. They convinced the government to make nicotine illegal unless it's within tobacco or a pharmaceutical product. They're going according to the 3 Ps of prohibition, puritanism and punishment. And it's my view that while this attitude holds, there is no hope for an endgame in Australia.
Welcome everybody, Permits Fogcast. Holy shit. Good thing I quit smoking.
Scene 1, Apple, take 2.
And welcome everybody, Permits Fogcast, episode number 4. For the week of July 18th. Thanks very much for taking the time to join us. And we got a great episode lined up for you. In the onset, you heard a clip from Dr. Attila Danko in Australia. That was from the Global Forum on Nicotine in 2015 in Warsaw. Dr. Attila Danko, I had the pleasure of meeting on Fresh 03's advocacy show a couple weeks back. Incredible guy. I've actually been kind of tuned into Dr. Danko down in Australia for quite a while, actually. I follow him on Twitter. He's very active. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that in Australia, Dr. Danko is probably the equivalent of Greg Conley in the US. He's just an amazing guy. A lot of heart, puts a lot into what he does, and holds vaping to the highest regard and fights for it on a daily basis. So, I came across a pretty interesting statistic sheet here this last week. Pretty interesting to say the least. Annual deaths in the United States. And of course, at the top of that list, tobacco kills approximately 435,000 people per year. Poor diet and exercise comes in second at 365,000 people per year. Alcohol, 85,000 people per year. Prescription drugs, 32,000. Motor vehicle crashes, 26,350. Homicides, around 20,300. Aspirin, if you can believe that. Aspirin, 7,600 deaths per year. And peanuts, 100 deaths per year from eating peanuts. Now, in the history of vaping, I believe there's been one recorded death, and that was the poor little guy that got a hold of the bottle of e-liquid from parents' negligence. Peanuts kill more people than vaping. Speaking of deaths, what about this Pokemon Go? What the hell is that all about? The world's going friggin' nuts. I created a new one, and I hope it catches on, and it's called Workymon. And that's where everybody walks around and looks for a job. We got a great show lined up this week. Like I mentioned, our worldwide advocacy tour. We're going to make a major stop in Australia. I've been promising for the last couple of weeks to get Paul Blamire on the show to talk about the dictatorship when it comes to vaping down in Australia. And I had an amazing conversation with Paul, probably pretty close to 3 hours long. There's no way I'm going to be able to get that all into this episode. So we're going to be having some interaction with Paul over the next couple episodes from all the recording that I got off of that conversation. Fantastic guy. I can't wait to delve into that. We're also going to touch on a little situation in Malaysia and also the good old USA. Lots going on down there. And this week, a very, very, very special My Vaping Story. The one, the only, the man, the myth, the legend, as he would always say, Fresh 03. The guy is an inspiration to not only myself, but to several others. Great guy to be around. A massive heart. A deep-rooted passion for this industry and the community. And just one of those guys you just want to be around. I've been fortunate enough to be invited on some of his live shows. Had the distinct pleasure of sitting down and talking with him in a one-on-one conversation. We had a blast. I think you're going to love the story that Fresh portrays. And also, we're going to finish things off this week with a permit to piss me off, my rant at the end of the show. So stick around. We're going to get rolling. And of course, this episode of the Fogcast brought to you by Jugheads. Fine Canadian handcrafted e-juices. Jugheads.co. We've got the vapors. Right now, I'm sitting here vaping on some Sinful Pear, which is one of my absolute favorites so far that I've had the pleasure of trying from Jugheads. It's a beautifully tasting ripe pear with I'm going to say a caramelized glaze on top of some vanilla ice cream. Absolutely amazing. Check them out, jugheads.co. Great juices, great prices. Gotta check them out.
Ladies and gentlemen, please rise for the Australian national anthem.
Fucking yeah, fucking nah, yeah, fucking what do you reckon, cunts? Fucking nah, fucking nah, yeah, nah, yeah, fucking what do you reckon, cunts? Fucking
do your balls hang low? Do they dangle to and fro? Can you tie 'em in a knot? Can you tie 'em in a bow? Can you sling 'em by your shoulder like a continental soldier? Can you do the double shuffle when your balls hang low? Do your balls hang low? Do they dangle to and fro? Can you bounce them off a wall like an Indian rubber ball? Do they make a lusty clamour when you hit 'em with a hammer? Can you do the double shuffle when your balls hang low? Keep your legs goddamn find a woman.
At this time, I've got the distinct opportunity to sit down with a good friend and a fellow vapor and advocate from Australia, Paul Blamire from Labworks Vapes. Welcome to the Fogcast, Paul. Great to have you with us.
Thank you for having me on your Fogcast. Nearly screwed that one up.
Okay, so we've discussed this several times, and there's quite a few people out there that have been involved in our discussions on some of the live shows and whatnot. But for potential to-be vapors or people interested in vaping that are kind of interested in what is going on in different areas of the world, as well as listeners that may be in Australia or in that vicinity, let's talk a little bit about what it is that you guys are facing down there right now in relation to vaping. Like what's happened? Because in my estimation, for a great number of years, Canada, the UK, and Australia have been the leaders in harm reduction. Not necessarily just tobacco harm reduction, but in harm reduction, period. And as of late, in my estimation, it seems like Australia has kind of fallen off that platform. And so just want to get a little bit of insight from you. What is going on with the extremities of the laws as far as vaping goes down in Australia?
Well, currently the laws in Australia aren't favouring vaping in any way, shape or form. The government is making their own decisions. They're not trying to interact with the vaping community, even though Dr. Attila Danko the other day on a show that I was part of, he said that we're an underground community and that we need to bring ourselves a little bit more above water and try and get a lot more smokers to swap across to vaping so we've got a little bit more of a voice in the community. But the problem that we're facing is that the government are making decisions based upon studies that are not what they should be reading. They shouldn't be even taking these studies into full consideration. They're not even interacting with the vaping community that's here currently. You know, it's a hard nut to swallow. But second to that, we've just had a federal election here, which the Canadians would understand, and the UK people, the US, it's a little bit different. If we're to get our voice heard, we need to be able to interact with, like, the parliamentary system from the grassroots. If we can't do that, we don't have a hope in hell. Second thing that we've got to face here is that nicotine juices are still illegal to buy at any of our brick and mortar shops or our online shops. So we have to import our nicotine from the United States or from various other places around the world. And in other words, all vapors here in Australia have to have some type of DIY knowledge. You go and buy a juice from a shop, then you've got to understand how to measure out your nicotine and then put it into your juice, and then you've got something to vape. That's where we're at right now.
What is the result of failing to comply with? If you can break down a little bit about, carrying mods and devices with you, carrying nicotine content juice, things of that nature, and what are the results?
Different states currently have different legislation or different laws. Western Australia, if you're found to be selling vape gear, they can shut you down completely. It's illegal in Western Australia. Victoria have passed a law that within 12 months, certain things will be illegal there as well. Queensland is the same. New South Wales, they're a little bit more lenient. We've got one very big brick and mortar in New South Wales where you can still go and sit down and test all the different juices. You can do that in Victoria still. I think you can still do it in South Australia, but there's still a little bit of umming and ahhing about that one. But a lot of the things in Australia regarding vaping, you get it sight unseen. You can't test it, you can't taste it. And a lot of people actually buy things online and import it, and then you'll see some very wacky questions come up in the different forums through social media as to what they're meant to be doing with this device and how to make it work properly, which goes to the education point that some devices you shouldn't be using if you're not experienced. Simple as that. And there's a danger aspect there. And if the Australian government doesn't see that, we're going to have accidents. And you're going to import 100 milligram nicotine and you want to start mixing that into your juice and you don't understand how to do it, you're going to have problems there as well. So it's a rock and a hard place right now, don't it? It really is.
And I'm also under the, I was aware of a situation that took place down there recently with somebody that was, had an online shop based out of their home that was selling devices and whatnot, and they were raided. What would happen there?
Again, that's in Western Australia. Their vaping laws are just ridiculous. That seems to be the second case similar. The first case, the gentleman was found to be selling vape gear, ended up winning one court battle against the government. They thought everything was fine. That person was then taken back to court and then found guilty on a charge that he was acquitted of earlier. And it's just like a snowball turning into into something outrageous. Western Australia, I still don't know exactly what's going on over there at the moment, but it's not a nice place to be if you're a vapor. I'm unsure of what would happen to you on the streets with vape gear.
Okay, well, let's kind of switch the gears just a little bit here. Back in, I pay close attention to the new nicotinealliance.org.au, and that's a big part of Dr. Attila Danko's spectrum. But there was a call to action back on the week of June 21st for the Victorian government voting for the Tobacco Amendment Bill. What, if anything, that you know of came out of that, and how does it affect the community?
The first time they tried to have it heard in Parliament, they didn't even get to it that day. So it was put back a couple of weeks until the 21st from memory. And even after what they listened to, a little bit later, I think it was about a week or so later, they actually passed the bill without any consideration for what's going on in Victoria. So over the next 12 months, the list of laws that they're bringing in there, it's just ludicrous. New South Wales at the moment seems to be the only state that has any leeway, and we're not sure whether or not we can take legal action. Like, not myself personally, but shop owners in Victoria, online traders in Victoria, not 100% sure. They haven't released all of it as yet. And the second thing that everyone's waiting on is the report from Dr. Simon Chapman. A few people would know about him and a few of his cronies into vaping, and as to whether or not they want to ban vaping Australia-wide, not even listening to the health concerns. It's ridiculous.
I guess when it boils down to it in an overall nutshell, it is separated. It is divided within certain parts of the country, obviously, as to what the extremities are, really. Like you mentioned, some places you can't even carry, any hardware without the risk of maybe getting charged. I mean, I'm not totally thorough on the fundamentals of the Australian government and how they operate, but I'm assuming, in Canada here, for instance, we have our federal government. When they pass a regulation, it's up to the provinces then to actually enforce those regulations.
Okay, we have exactly the same setup here. We have, at the federal level, we've got the federal government, and then instead of a province, we actually have the states. So we have Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria, South Australia, Western Australia, Northern Territory, and Tasmania. So, yes, it's like a province in Canada. The federal law, and then the states can actually make their own laws on top of the federal law here. So it gets broken down and broken down again, which why can't it be just one law? That's it. Across Australia. It's one country, for Christ's sake. Why can't we sit down with the politicians and say, look, we're vapors. We're trying to help, the public health system here by stopping getting sick and, dying on you. But then again, maybe they want us to go down that pathway. It's also got a lot to do here with tax dollars and the price of tobacco in comparison to vaping. That's the big killer, okay? A cigarette here is worth about $1 at the moment, and vaping in comparison would be about 12 cents. There's your comparison. So how are they going to make up if we take all the smokers and we give them all vapes? Oh, we only make 12 cents. How are we going to make the shortfall? That's where it really boils down to it right now. And in Australia, everything's changed the last 3 years here with the Liberal government, or as we now call it, the neoliberals, like the really extreme right-wing nut jobs. And we've just had another election and somehow the idiots have got back in again. I don't understand that one. Go figure. So it's like trying to push a full wheelbarrow of crap uphill here. We don't know how to go about it. The people in government that we need to talk to, they won't talk to us. Simple.
So basically, in a sense, based on just the fundamentals of how the government operates, they've taken the stance of operating pretty much like the United States in a way. You got your federal government who can make regulation and pass bills, but the states can create their own set of rules that they imply, and it's happening. I mean, for instance, you got the states down there. Some states are charging outrageous tax on e-liquids, and some states have totally banned, like Utah in recent weeks has banned absolutely everything, online sales, you name it. Happening here, I mean, Quebec was the first province to jump on back in early 2015. They jumped on that and banned online sales. There's no nothing. They have vape shops. People can go into the vape shops. They can't sample. They can't vape in public places. But if the federal government, as I mentioned on my Fogcast last week, if they come up with this regulatory framework for tobacco harm reduction, they can actually overturn what the province has set in place. Whereas in Australia, it sounds like, and in the United States, that's just not going to happen.
Okay, we also have a department here that's very much like the FDA. They're called the Therapeutic Goods Administration. They would like to see vaping products across the board. They don't see it as like a reduction. They see it as a gateway, like the rest of the studies around the world. They're not reading the proper studies. They're making their own assumptions because, okay, it creates a vapor, but it looks like smoke. So that's smoking. But if you look at the documentation that's coming out of America at the moment, they've actually changed some of the wording, and it's called ENDS, which is like a nicotine system, like a nicotine reduction system, or like an end to smoking cessation device. And they would like to regulate it that way. Sure, it could be good in some ways if they go down that pathway, but in others, I don't think it would be, because then they'll be dispensing nicotine-based juices at a chemist. And then Big Pharma gets involved in creating these juices. I honestly don't trust what Big Pharma would put in them. If Big Pharma had their hands in the manufacture of a liquid, what the hell are they going to put in there? Honestly. And you read some of the other...
Let's talk a little bit. I know you've touched on it before in our private conversations. And I know there was just an election. I'm not too sure exactly what took place and what changed over. Let's talk a bit about Simon Chapman. What are your thoughts on his role in what's going on with the vaping industry down in Australia?
All right, I'll get this out of the way first and foremost. Simon Chapman's an arse clown. Second to that, you can't trust him. He has his own agenda. He's currently at Sydney University doing the study on tobacco reduction. I don't think so, Jan, because he's never invited any study into vaping whatsoever that I know of or I'm currently aware of. I do not like his ideology or his methodology as to how he comes to him and his panel, actually, the whole lot of them. I don't understand how they come to their ideas without even interacting with the current vaping community that's in play. And if you try and approach him, I know best. Oh, well, hands in the air. He don't care.
Why I ask is because he is actually recognized as a tobacco control media public health go-to person. But on the flip side of the coin, he's a spare time Twitter troll. He's totally against harm reduction. He's picked fights with and ridiculed pro-vaping researchers and advocates. And why, for whatever reason, is a guy like this in any kind of control?
No idea at the moment. Good question, actually, Permit, because I'd really like to know who is funding his studies, where the paychecks are coming from and where that study is being funded from. Who by, whether it's Big Pharma. I don't think it's Big Tobacco somehow. I think it's Big Pharma. I think it has to do with all the types of medications that you can take or chew or stick up your nose or up your butt, for that matter, to try and give up cigarettes. Go figure. Because I haven't seen anything as to where his funding is coming from for these studies. I know that some of it's coming from government, but current government that we've got, they're just another pack of arse clowns.
it blows my mind how people, some of these higher up, these authorities are blatantly just trying their best to walk right over the vaping industry. Simon Chapman tweeted an ad for Authentics. You have a cigarette down there called Authentics?
Yeah.
This ad at the top says, kick the e-cigarette habit. Authentics, real cigarettes for real addicts. What the hell are people thinking? Look, okay, I understand. If you're against vaping, you're against vaping. But my point is we all know it's a worldwide, doesn't matter what studies or whatever, we all know cigarettes are killers. So why would you push people or attempt to push people from a harm reduction product that we have, the Royal College of Physicians have thoroughly tested and reported on as a tobacco harm reduction, and then just blatantly push people from that, or attempt to push people from that back to cigarettes? That to me, the guy should be strung up.
Yeah, I really don't understand why, certain people are in power here, or they're even looking at them for studies. It's a joke. It really is a joke.
Now, what can Australian vapers do to support the cause and to try to get a voice heard?
Well, the Australian vaping community on a whole needs to really pull their head out of the sand, join together, stop being, a bunch of little underground groups, and really start voicing their opinions, regardless of, little calls to action. We've got segmented groups here in Australia. I'm not going to name them. They're all social media groups as such, but they won't interact with each other. There's a lot of infighting as such. And that has to cease, first and foremost. If you're a vapor, I don't care if you just turned 18 and you switched from stinkies to vaping, or if you're like me, I'm 47, for Christ's sakes. It's got to be everyone across that whole spectrum, and the older people that vape now. My local brick and mortar, I am going to give a shout out now to the Steamery here in New South Wales, in Sydney, hey to Max and the rest of the crew, but they need to come together and understand. If you want to keep vaping, you've really got to pull your head out of the sand, or out of your ass for that matter, get together and fight the government on what they're trying to do to us. And this is what pisses me off a lot. I also think, Permit, that you really need to speak to Bogan on this, to Sam, because he's of the same vein as I am, right? Now, I could be stinky foul mouth on here, but I'm not. And he understands. He's a vapor. He's also he's Australia's biggest reviewer. And unless we all band together and work as one, this ain't going to happen. Simple.
And again, Paul Blamire from Labworks Vapes in Australia. Thanks very much again, buddy, for taking the time to sit down with me and help get some insight on what is going on down in Australia. I've taken your advice. I have reached out to Sam, the Vaping Bogan in Australia as well, and he's agreed to sit down and talk to me a little further, give his insight and his perspective on what's going on. So look forward to that in the next couple upcoming episodes as well. We're going to continue to focus on the situation down there because, we have our issues in our own areas, our own towns, our own cities, our own states or provinces, our own countries, but realistically, vaping is and always will be a global community, and the issues that we face are a global problem, and we've got to be mindful of what is going on all over the world, which is pretty much the same thing in most areas, just harsher in some than in the others, and that is extremely evident in Australia. Again, thanks very much, Paul. Appreciate you taking the time and look forward to more of your input in upcoming episodes as well. All right, so from Australia, let's hop over to Malaysia. Interesting story from an article from the Southeast Asia Globe. New laws could spell the end of Malaysia as a vaping wonderland. Article by David Hutt. Following the release of a major report in the U.S. in November, a headline in the Telegraph stated that e-cigarettes are no safer than smoking tobacco. Replying to The Guardian days later, the Deputy Director of the UK Centre of Tobacco and Alcohol Studies, Linda Bald, insisted that there is still no evidence that e-cigarettes are as harmful as smoking. Vaping has saved lives, said Norman Ismail of Malaysia E-Vaporizers and Tobacco Alternative Association. As ex-smokers, we have changed to vaping, and some have even quit both due to being a part of the support community. Vaporizers do not contain 4,000 plus chemicals and carcinogens, but only 4 elements you'll find in your daily life and food intake. So how can that be damaging? In 2015, we estimated that the number of vaping shops in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia was about 600. But now there's no more than 150 of those shops still remaining. Every day we hear of shops being closed. Vaping has been banned in Thailand, Singapore, and Cambodia, while other Southeast Asian nations are mulling prohibition. This has made Malaysia one of the last bastions in the region, and such was vaping's popularity that in November, Global Post dubbed Malaysia Asia's vaping wonderland. MEVTA estimates that the country's vaping industry was worth almost $670 million in 2015. This is calculated based on the Health Ministry's estimation that there was 1.2 million vapers, the assumption that each bought a 30 ml e-liquid refill once a week. This excludes the hardware and accessories that would significantly rise the industry's value. However, if Malaysia could have been called a vaping wonderland just a few months ago, today it is beginning to resemble a paradise lost. Vaping remains a gray area in Malaysia. It is not banned, but is yet to be regulated and legalized. However, this is set to change in the upcoming months. Late last year, the Ministry of Health announced that it was working on laws to regulate vaping from where one can and cannot smoke to the rules on the manufacture and the sale of products. It has also been suggested that liquids will only be sold by licensed pharmacists and registered medical practitioners. If the regulations are passed, Malaysia would not be the only country in the world seeking to control the e-cigarette market. Here's another thing, while we're on the worldwide and over in the Asia side, an article came out from the guy that came up with the very first e-cigarette design in China. That was in 2003. Han Lik, I believe is pronounced. He was a pharmacist who was trying to quit smoking. Here's a guy that invented the e-cig. He still vapes to this day. Apparently, in the article he mentions that he does smoke the odd cigarette just to keep in tune with the taste of tobacco as he's working on other projects. However, they asked him about what he thought about the new regulations in the US, and he said, well, you probably mean the deeming regulations. This is positive. This will increase the confidence in this category of products, as well as the manufacturing standards will be improved. However, I also feel that this might put more restriction on the innovation side, which will have a negative impact. Having said so, I also strongly believe regulatory environments might improve as well because regulations are more or less behind the movement of consumer market. There's a lot of concern that these regulations might kill off many companies in the meantime. At this moment, if you're talking about Blue, one of the big tobacco brands, Leak Works Now, is very well positioned in the regulatory environment. There are many brands available on the market at the moment, but fancy packaging is not really the solution, he said. What's more important is the content, standard, and safety of the product. In terms of choices, as pharmacist, ex-smoker, and developer, I'm very keen to recommend closed systems like Cigalikes. It's not only because of my intellectual property, but more importantly, it's a product people consume through their mouths and inhale into their lungs, so the safety is very important. And here's his thoughts on the DIY industry that blossomed. Because the customer does not fully understand the scientific perspective or standard assembly, obviously there's a risk. I know a small group on the market is doing so. I do not recommend that they do this. And in the big old US of A, where things just seem to be getting worse and worse as we near that August 8th market freeze deadline and getting ever so closely to December 31st, which is to me a more important date, but something that came up. Judge Amy Berman Jackson, a federal judge from the District Court in Washington, D.C., has finally set a date of October 19th, 2016 for the landmark lawsuit filed by Nicotine Labs against the legality of the FDA e-cig regulations. She also demanded that the legal action filed by the Tampa-based retailer be joined by another lawsuit filed last month by 11 vaping advocacy groups, including the Consumer Advocates for Smoke-Free Alternatives Association, CASA, and the Smoke-Free Alternatives Trade Association, SAFADA, NotBlowingSmoke.org, Sevilla USA. So that's huge. Well, several other lawsuits with similar allegations against the FDA have also been filed throughout the country. Judge Jackson wants to consolidate these two cases because they were filed in the same federal court. Rather than hearing two cases at different times, Jackson appears to be trying to streamline the judicial process and perhaps save the taxpayers a bit of time and money. If the FDA does not respond to Jackson's demands for the consolidation by August 16th, then the October court date stands. That's pretty amazing. So Nicopure joins the right to be smoke-free, and it's going to be a massive one. That's good news coming out of Washington. Pennsylvania. So we've all kind of kept up to date. We know that they got nailed with this 40% wholesale tax, and it's getting even worse over there. Starting October 1st, people of the state of Pennsylvania can be sentenced up to 5 years in jail if you do not pay the 40% on vapor products that you might have brought from outside into Pennsylvania. This is by far the most outrageous law that has happened in America, and it needs to be abolished. This is pure craziness. Really, truly, it's absolute nonsense. Going to prison, think about that. Let's just stop and think about that. 5-year prison sentence for not paying your 40% tax for importing vape products into Pennsylvania. And also this week, Altria urged the FDA to ease on regulations. Professor Michael Siegel, who lectures for the Department of Health Sciences at Boston University School of Public Health and possesses 25 years worth of experience in the field of tobacco control, wrote this in his blog this week. Altria told the FDA that the pre-market tobacco application it has in place creates requirements that are unruly burdensome, unnecessary, and beyond the scope of the agency's jurisdiction under the Tobacco Control Act. Altria continued, these requirements will force many small corporations out of business, which ultimately goes against the promotion of public health. Altria pointed out that the FDA itself acknowledged that a number of small vaping businesses wouldn't survive as a consequence of these requirements, yet none of these statistics appeared in its regulatory impact analysis. Altria Group is the parent company for Philip Morris USA, which manufactures cigarettes for Marlboro, John Middleton, U.S. Smokeless Tobacco Company, Michelle Wine Estates, Philip Morris Capital Corp., Newmark, and At a Glance, besides its own vaping products marketed under the brand Mark 10. Newmark acquired in February 2014 the Cigalite manufacturer Green Smoke for approximately $110 million. Altria and Philip Morris International, through strategic framework agreements, seem to be willing to share vaping products and reduce risk tobacco products like the IQOS commercialization in the US and Europe. And Dr. Siegel concurs with Altria's proposal to establish baseline performance standards for ENDS products that, when met, would serve as a basis for an abbreviated or alternative marking authorization pathway to satisfy statutory PMTA requirements. Continued by listing Altria's main goals, which are: number 1, support manufacturers' efforts to develop and bring to market innovative products that may advance the public health. And number 2, to allow the industry participants to engage and compete in a dynamic market. This is not the first time we witnessed what seems to be an initiative with the public's health in mind by big tobacco companies. In fact, such companies have been trying to change their image by investing a substantial amount of money in research and develop potentially risk-reduced products. However, many anti-tobacco activists remain suspicious of tobacco companies and fear that such initiatives are nothing but a marketing ploy and a way to generate a new source of revenue from vaping products and by keeping dual usage among vapers as sales from tobacco cigarettes decline. In his blog as well, Dr. Siegel went into detail to show how Altria and Reynolds American are not offering youth-friendly flavored vaping liquids and how their marketing is definitely not targeted at youth. He also points out that their products are not accessible to non-adults in any way, as they do not sell any products via the internet, and they do not sell cheaper disposable versions. He claims that although there are a small number of tobacco companies with no scruples, and the two aforementioned companies are definitely not amongst them, the latest appeal to the FDA and the fact that they're behind the Bishop-Cole Amendment are proof of that. Definitely something that we will be continuing to follow. Very interesting to say the least. It does look more and more like tobacco companies, big tobacco does have some vested interest in these deeming regulations as well, and they do have something to lose. So we will definitely keep our eye on that as well. And that will conclude this episode segment of the Worldwide Advocacy Tour. Before we move along, I got a couple quick shout outs. This Saturday, if you're in the Calgary area, the Vape Depot is celebrating its 1-year anniversary and is holding a YYC Vape Meet. Saturday, July the 23rd. Come hang out at the YYC Vape Meet, celebrate our 1-year anniversary. We'll be having a lot of giveaways, prizes, challenges to win. Be here for sponsor giveaways, cloud competitions, and more. Do check it out. I'm going to check it out. Go see Jay, Robbie Vapes, Donald Lady Clouds. Let's go down there, support them, help them celebrate their 1-year anniversary. Jay does a lot for the community and has a fantastic vape store in Calgary here. You got to go check it out. They just recently moved. They're located at number 103, 2323 32nd Avenue Northeast here in Calgary. Let's go get down there this Saturday, help Jay and the gang celebrate their 1-year anniversary. Looks like a fun time. I'm heading out there for sure. Also, I just want to give a quick shout out to a buddy of mine up outside of Edmonton, my buddy Harris Vapor, 2014, good buddy of mine, known him for almost a year now. And he just sent me a Magnasonic ultrasonic cleaner, which I've never had. I've never had one. He got a deal on Amazon and he got 2 of them and he sent me one. Thanks very much, buddy. I got it today. I plugged it right in and threw in a bunch of RTAs, and man, does it do a nice job. Can't thank you enough, buddy. Really means a lot to me. And Permits Fogcast, brought to you in part by Vapor Canada. VAPRCANADA.com, Canada's #1 source for vapes, e-juices, and more. Our low overhead means savings passed on to you. Amazing service at amazing prices, proudly serving fellow vapors worldwide. Check them out on Facebook /Vapor Canada or Twitter @Vapor Canada. And again, folks, that's VAPRCANADA. Some great deals on the website right now. Samsung INR 25Rs, 18650 batteries, $13.95. Kangertech stainless steel OCC coils, pack of 5 for $14.50, which is a smoking deal in this region. Joytech Ego AIO, which I've talked about in the device debut in the previous episode, $22.50, another great deal. And the Wismec Rulo RX200S for $76.50, great deal on that as well. E-juice, mods, accessories, they have it all. VaporCanada.com, VAPRCANADA.com. They're located in Calgary, 3rd floor, 100 4th Avenue Southwest downtown. Open 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday, and weekends by appointment only. Get over there, check out VaporCanada.com. Great bunch of folks down there.
I'm Pressure 3, and this is My Vaping Story. So let's see, I've been vaping over 3 years now at this point, closing in on 4 pretty quick. I started vaping, I think it was fairly close to when the first Cig-a-likes kind of came out, but I didn't take it all that seriously. It was just something to take out to the bar with me. I mean, that's always something, that's always kind of a draw for you. I can sit in the bar. I don't have to go outside to smoke my cigarettes. I can sit here with this cool little thing, and everybody, you get a little bit of attention. What's he doing over there? Is he smoking in here? That sort of stuff. And the first Cig-a-like I bought, I think it was like $150, something ridiculous like that. It tasted terrible. It worked terribly. It had 2 batteries, and I think you could get like an hour worth of life out of both of them, something like that. It was just a ridiculous setup. I thought it was pretty nifty for taking to the bar, but inevitably you'd go outside and smoke, and then you just kind of forget about it. I think I actually wound up leaving one of the batteries at the bar, and then eventually I just kind of gave up on it and threw the damn thing away. And then later on, I bought a second one that was like $75 because I wasn't going to spend $150 again. I thought maybe I could use the battery again or something like that. And they weren't compatible, and the liquid tasted terrible again. It was supposed to taste like a Camel cigarette, which is what I smoked the last 5 years I was smoking. It was all like Camel Lights, and it didn't taste like that at all. It tasted pretty terrible. It just kind of fell into disuse. Like a lot of people, I think when you first given vaping a try, you wind up with a terrible setup. It doesn't do it for you. It doesn't do what vaping can do. And you're kind of unaware of it. And I kind of wandered through the world, and I heard all the terrible stories about vaping. It's going to give you some incurable form of pneumonia. I believe that was one of the first negative press things that I heard about. I actually just had a lady comment on one of my videos about that she was worried that her son's lungs were going to fill up with water because he's breathing water vapor in. And I assured her that is not the case, and that lungs are perfectly capable of absorbing water. So, these negative connotations about vaping just kind of stick around. And I bought into them for a long time. And finally, one of my buddies at work for Christmas got me like a little ego set up with like a CE3. He got me some liquid that kind of tasted like gingerbread, which it wasn't fantastic, but I did use it a little bit more because it wasn't super terrible like that initial e-liquid was. It didn't taste like burnt pencil shavings or licking a cat's behind or something like that. So I did use that a little bit more. Mainly like if I'd go on vacation like California or something. California it's so anti-smoking that I didn't want to chance anything. So I took my little e-cigarette, and I could still do that at the bar in California, and got drunk with it, had a good time with it. Eventually I decided that I need to quit drinking. I've told that story a bunch of times, but I got angry at my nephew once, and I kind of flipped a switch in my head that things needed to change in my life. And that was kind of the beginning of me taking a look at myself and seeing, kind of how far I'd let myself go. I'd gotten, super overweight. I was drinking all the time. I was getting so angry at people for no reason at all. And so I decided that I needed to quit drinking. And so I went and got help. And, that's one of the messages I always put out when I talk about my drinking days is if you need help quitting drinking, don't be afraid to ask for it, because it's a lot tougher than you think, especially if you're a heavy drinker. It's a lot harder than you think. It kind of becomes a part of your lifestyle. And, it was just like smoking. It was one of those things that it had become such a part of my lifestyle that I didn't even think twice about it. Stopping on the way home, grabbing a 12-pack and waking up in the morning with a beer left in my fridge or something like that every single night on the way home from work. And so I quit drinking, and I was sitting there, I was still smoking, and we got hit by the government furlough. It was right around 4 years ago when they hit us with that. And being a government worker meant I couldn't go to work for a certain amount of time. It happened to be one day out of every week you could not go to work. So they took 8 hours off our schedule. It dropped us from being full-time employees down to part-time employees. And so we lost benefits. We lost certain aspects of our pay that we had been getting, years and years and years. I thought I'd be fine. I'd been saving money, but I didn't save nearly enough. And so at that point, I was sitting there and I still had my little ego. I think I still had the same tank. I'm sure it was burnt out, but not like I'd know the difference at the time. So I was sitting there with it. I was watching all my money just kind of go down the drain at that point. And that's one thing that'll really get my brain working is when numbers start crunching. And I'm sitting there staring at this thing and I'm looking at my cigarettes and I'm like, there's no way I can afford to keep smoking if this keeps up, because right now the plan is in place for 10 years. So they could do this to us anytime for the next 10 years that they want. There's no way I can continue to afford smoking at this point. So I know there's a vape shop right down the road here. It's like 6 blocks away from me. I know in their window, there's a sign that says, if I spend $10 with them, that's the equivalent of 5 packs of cigarettes. So I'm going to go figure out what is going on with vaping. So I wandered into the vape shop. I talked to the guy for a little bit. I had my setup and I had my little gingerbread e-liquid, and it wasn't very good. I was just looking at it as something to kind of supplement the smoking and keep the costs down because, like I said, my brain always works in numbers. There's always numbers swirling all the time. I walked into this vape shop and I must have tried 100 e-liquids that day just to try and find the flavors that appealed to me. And I was going through the menu, and he's seen the guy that was working the counter. He's seen hundreds of me at this point. So he just, keeps handing me the testers and I'm trying everything. And that looks like a good one. Can I try that one? That one looks like a good one. Can I try that one? This one's pretty close to that. Can I try that one? And finally I settled on a coffee e-liquid. It's called Coffee High by 2Ps. And I think I wound up walking out with like 3 bottles of it in like 18 milligram or something like that. That night, I filled up my little CE4. I didn't even think about buying a replacement tank while I was there. I'm just sitting there, vaping away on this super duper strong coffee flavor. And it's a crazy, crazy strong coffee flavor. But it appealed to my palate because I'm a big coffee drinker. I love coffee. I loved coffee almost as much as I loved smoking at the time. And I had intentions of going back to smoking. This was just something to get me by. That first night I just sat there and I vaped, and I went out and I think I had a cigarette at one point, and then I walked out and I had my I'm going to bed cigarette, which if you're a former smoker, you know all about that cigarette. That's that last cigarette of the night. You got to get it in right before bed, get the nicotine to put you to sleep. I woke up the next morning. So I had my first cigarette of the morning, grabbed my vape. I think I only had a couple at work that day. Mostly I was just vaping, and I got home that night and I just kind of sat down in front of the computer and just started vaping. Just vape, 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 vape. I really didn't go out for a cigarette that night. I went out for my I'm going to bed cigarette. Didn't really notice anything funny about the flavor of cigarettes yet. It took the next day. And the next day I just grabbed my vape and I was like, the vape worked really well last night. I'm just taking this to work. I had my morning cigarette and I started vaping, and I just vape all day at work. Every chance I got, I'd run outside, have a couple puffs, come back in, run outside, have a couple puffs. Every time that urge to smoke came up, I'd just go out and vape, and I'd vape until it was gone. And it didn't take a lot. It really didn't take a lot. And I just stuck with it all day. And I got home and I kept doing the same thing. It was nice. I could sit in my apartment. I didn't have to go outside to smoke. I was just sitting there vaping, just vape, vape, vape. So I had like 1 cigarette that morning. That night I went out for my I'm going to bed cigarette, and I lit it up and I tasted it, and it tasted so bad. It tasted so terrible. It was just an eye-opening moment for me. We all have those eye-opening moments in our lives. One moment, a year earlier, I'd gotten mad at my nephew for something. That opened my eyes to my problem with drinking and how much I needed to change my life. Sitting there having this vape and tasting that cigarette that night and how bad it was, it just opened my eyes. And I thought to myself, what have I been doing to myself? This is crazy. Why would I keep doing this to myself? And I put that cigarette out. I walked back inside, grabbed my vape. I had intended to go to sleep, and I just grabbed my vape and I just kind of sat in front of the computer and just vaped until I was ready to go to sleep. And that was the last time I had a cigarette. It took me 3 days to get off of cigarettes fully. I think I just kind of stumbled onto that path of success by not taking my cigarettes to work. I need to do this. I need to get onto the vape because it's cheaper. So I'm going to vape until the urge to smoke goes away. And that was the secret for me. And that's the advice I give to a lot of people when I see them making that switch is you just vape until that urge to smoke goes away, and it will go away. It may not seem like it right away. You're just kind of sitting there like, man, I could really go for a cigarette. And then all of a sudden it's just kind of gone and you got your vape and you're like, man, this tastes way better anyway. So that's kind of how I got into vaping. Was I really, really couldn't afford to continue smoking, and just that happenstance in my life, it just kind of opened my eyes to what I'd been doing to myself, looking at myself in the mirror, and you're having difficulty walking a mile. What's wrong with you, man? You know, you used to be the fastest guy in your army company. You know, nobody could keep up with you, and now you can't even walk a mile. What in the world is wrong with you? And so it completely changed my life. Vaping completely changed my life. You know, I've lost 50 pounds since I started vaping. I ride my bicycle everywhere. I think the tires are rotting off of my car at this point. You know, I smoked for 20 years. It was madness thinking back about it now, but the hand to mouth thing that you get so used to doing, it becomes such a part of your life that, I mean, when I was using patches or trying, it wasn't Chantix. It was whatever the big one was before that. No, it wasn't Zyban. Was it Zyban? It might have been. When I was on that, I think what kind of drove me back to smoking after the 6 months I'd been smoke free, using that was just that hand to mouth. I missed it. And I would just chew the hell out of pens and pencils and stuff. There was nothing safe around me. I would always just grab something and start gnawing on it, you know. And I think people discount that part of smoking quite a bit. I remember it was probably like a decade ago at this point, there were nicotine inhalers. Not really like vaping, but it was a similar thought process that you could, you know, still have the hand to mouth motion. That seemed like a really good idea to me at the time. You know, like anything with smoking, I look at it, I'm like, that seems like a really good idea. I bet you I could quit smoking it like that. I better go out and have a cigarette. They have such a vicious hold on you. You don't really see it until you're able to walk away from it. I mean, at this point, I'm vaping, you know, 1.5 or zero nic, almost 100% nicotine free. If you've been around vaping for more than 3 months, your nicotine level has gone through the floor almost certainly at this point. You could walk away almost scot-free. If you're vaping 3 milligram nicotine, the transition to zero is next to nothing. You could transition off of nicotine so easily. And I that was another one of the choices that I made is I don't want to be a slave to something else. You know, especially once I got into rebuilding and getting into drippers, just your ability to intake that nicotine so much faster. That once again kind of opened my eyes that, man, I dripped some 6 milligram, I think it was, is what I was on at the time. And that's what I had at the house. I dripped some 6 milligram and just about fell out of my chair. I got so dizzy. So that was another one of those things. I was like, you know, I need to transition down lower. I transitioned to 3 pretty easily. But even that, you know, you get yourself on a good vape fest and all of a sudden you're like, whoa, wait a minute. The room's spinning a little bit. All right, I got myself Nick high. I'm getting a little Nick sick from all this. You know, what's the next step down? 1.5? All right, I can do 1.5 milligram. By the time I got to 1.5 milligram, I was like, why do I even bother at all? You know, so you know, as you transition through vaping, it's such an incredible gift that was given to all of us, and all the friends I've made, through the vaping community, not just the local folks at like the brick and mortar. I can go hang out down there for hours and chat with guys about vaping and, you know, hand out advice to young or new vapors, you know, like, hey, you know, you could try this. I think you might have a little bit more success with this than you would something else, you know, and it's cool to be a part of that community. Just, you know, and that's just the local part of it. You know, our local advocacy, our local brick and mortars, we all kind of know each other. We're all kind of good friends, and being able to be involved with that community. But then once I got involved in the YouTube community, it just completely opened up everything for me. And I kind of got lucky, really. I was a big fan of Remy Johnson. I believe you watch her as well, Permit. Remy Johnson, really awesome gal from Australia, real artsy kind of hippie gal. Super, super, super duper cool gal, though. So I was watching one of her videos, and by that point I'd already started rebuilding, and I had, you know, my cursory knowledge of rebuilding atomizers. So I started passing on little tips to her because she said she was thinking about getting into dripping, which I think is kind of the epitome of where everybody should get in vaping. But try not to make any judgments about anybody's vaping style, because anything that keeps us off cigarettes is a good thing. And so I'm sitting there handing out this little advice, and she accepted my Facebook friend request. She said, why don't you just shoot me a video? So I proceeded to sit down and shoot. I think I shot like an hour and a half worth of footage, all about the supplies you need to get into rebuilding. And I tried to be like super duper informative, and I was super duper factual guy. Just laying it out there. I thought I was doing I thought I was doing a great job with the video. I go back and watch it, kind of cringe, but just laying these facts out for Remy, and she really dug it. You know, she really dug it that there was all this other stuff that nobody ever talks about, as far as, you know, when you want to get into mech mods and you want to get into rebuilding, that there's, you know, you need your batteries, you need your battery chargers, you need your wicking and your wire, you know, a set of screwdrivers. And so I tried to go over every single thing she might need. She really dug the video and posted it on her blog, which kind of gave me a rub off of her crowd. And at that point, I think she was up over 1,000 subscribers already. And kind of overnight, my channel went from having one sub who I have no earthly idea who the guy was, to all of a sudden I had like 120 subs. And I was like, wow, you know, there's might be something going on here. And so Addy Tooney actually got in touch with me. Addy Tooney, the man, the myth, the legend, got in touch with me. And so I started taking advice from him, and he'd asked to see, hey, you know, you said you have this atomizer. Could you do a build on it? I said, you know, I'd be like, you know, heck yeah, Addy Tooney, thank you. You know, thanks for commenting on my video. Thanks for coming back. And so I do a silly little build. Little did I know who I'm really talking to. You know, Addy Tooney, he's like a master builder, but he was just so supportive. And I'm sitting there doing like these single coil center posted builds on stuff, and, you know, showing people how to vape on an iStick, or how to drip on an iStick, stuff like that. And, you know, Addy Tooney was just sitting there encouraging me. And that's just kind of how the channel kind of exploded. There was this dude named Will who was super awesome. He was giving me a lot of advice. We kind of actually exchanged videos back and forth at one point. Danny Brandt, who was super into my channel early, really kind of dug what I was doing. And I think it was about my third video, I just kind of gave up on being a super factual guy, and just kind of started being myself a lot more, and letting my personality, my sense of humor come out. I started having like imaginary conversations with my equipment and things like that. And all of a sudden people really started to dig on the channel. And I was really surprised that it grew and has grown to the point that it has. And eventually I got into DIY thanks to Addy Tooney. Addy Tooney, great man, great friend, better friend. He was once again supporting my channel, and he said, hey man, I want to send you a K fund, the infamous Addy Tooney K funds. This was before they had really started, you know, kind of blowing up, becoming a status thing like they are these days. It's awesome. You know, you did this orchid video. I got something that's better than an orchid. The orchid, I mean, when the orchid came out, it was a heck of a tank. It leaked like nobody's business, but it was a good tank, and you could do some really crazy, awesome things with an orchid. And so this guy's telling me all about how much better this K-Fun is. I had a K-Fun, I think I had a K-Fun Light at the time. I was like, man, you know, it's got good flavor, but at this point I've kind of moved beyond that vape. And he sent me along this K-Fun, and he said, hey man, I'm just going to throw some homemade e-liquid. And I was like, homemade e-liquid? Okay. But I've got this K-Fun full of e-liquid. So I'm sitting there, and I put it up so that it would sit up. I just kind of looked at it for like 3 days. I wasn't sure if I was going to vape it. I wasn't sure if I trusted this man's e-liquid that he was making at his house. It seemed a bizarre thing to me, and it didn't seem that there was any way this could be a good thing. And I was a little worried that maybe he had put some angel dust or something into the K-Fun, into his homemade e-liquid. I wasn't sure exactly what Addy Tooney's scene was at the time. He may be into some freaky stuff that maybe I'm not. I was worried about my job for a minute. I was like, maybe I vape this, and next thing I know, I'm getting fired because there's cocaine in this e-liquid. Finally, curiosity wins over. I slap it on, I think my Hannah DNA 30. So I'm vaping this thing at 30 watts, which at the time was, like the epitome of a vape. And this e-liquid was incredible. It was the most incredible e-liquid I had ever tried. I was like, are you kidding me? This dude's making this at his house? So I started chatting with him about it. I was like, how do you make it? And he sent me the recipe. I thought it was going to be some sort of a secret, like he didn't want to share his recipe with me. But I'm sitting there, and I get all the ingredients, and I mix it up. the way I think it's supposed to be done, and it doesn't taste the same. There's a similarity to it, but it doesn't taste quite the same. So I start talking to Addy again about what am I doing wrong. He's like, so what are you using for drops? And I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm using the dropper tops on the bottle like I'm supposed to. And he's like, no, Fresh, you're doing this all wrong. And so basically through like a chain of like, it was like 10 emails, Addy Tooney taught me to DIY. From that point forward, I had this e-liquid that I could target, and I was able to nail it down on like my third try. Addy's custard, if anybody's wondering what that first e-liquid was, real similar to Addy's yogurt, but it's got a custard base instead of a Greek yogurt base. I started kind of wrapping my head around percentages. I start finding resources on flavors. Eventually, I discovered ELR. I think the site had actually stood up within like the month when I actually ran across it. And it didn't have all that much, but the note section was starting to take off, and people were in there making notes about stuff. And it was an invaluable resource. And once I started kind of getting the hang of all of it, I realized how easy it was to mix up my own e-liquids. And, you know, those first initial mistakes that I made, I was able to eliminate them really quickly by going out and using these resources that were out there that not a lot of people know are out there, and which is why I'm always plugging like ELR, e-liquid-recipes.com, if anybody's wondering what the ELR is. Probably like the biggest DIY site on the planet at this point. I think there's hundreds of thousands of recipes on there. Just the notes section, you could go in and read what other people had done. And, you know, there's always some knucklehead that's, I put it at 20% or I put it at like 0.25%. You just discard those and you start recognizing different users. And you're like, okay, Wayne Walker, you have to say his name backwards, did it this way. And that's DIY or die. He's invaluable. You go on, and if you see his name in a flavor, you look at the research that he did, because he's going just, this is how I like to use it. This is why. This is the flavor profile I'm getting. You see a lot of those folks over on ELR. And so you run across these resources and you start realizing you don't have to make a lot of the mistakes like I did, like Rin did. Rin Vapes, who's been DIYing longer than I think anybody. I think Rin Vapes created DIY. Don't tell anybody else. Don't share that with anybody. But I think Rin may have invented DIY. You know, you start running across these resources, and I got pretty lucky right away with having Addy Tooney there to walk me through stuff. But it's really not nearly as hard as people think it is. If you go out and you look at the resources that are out there, you watch a couple videos, you kind of wrap your head around what a percentage is and how you can get there, whether through weight or volume or by syringes or by drops or whatever you need to do, however you feel like doing it. There's no wrong way to DIY either. Kind of the way the scene's going, I think we're going to have a generation of DIYers being able to reach out and being one of those resources like I was able to stumble across, being one of those resources that people could, you know, oh, let's go watch a Fresh video. Fresh says how to mix the concentrate. Fresh says how to make a strawberry lemonade, or he's got all these DIY live shows and he talks people through all this. You know, that means the world to me. Just the thought of being able to be out there and helping people like that. The advocacy stuff, we're getting to the point where there's, you know, every dollar that we donate is a drop in the bucket compared to what is going to be needed. It's helpful for people to go out and to donate and to continue to buy stuff like Addy's yogurt or banana bondage from Adora, or get the sweet I Vape I Vote shirts from Vaping Swag. It's helpful to do things like that, to donate your money to CASA or Sebia or the Right to Be Smoke-Free lawsuit like Heavy's doing with his e-liquid. But the most important thing we have right now is education, because there's so much negativity attached to vaping right now, and it's completely undeserved. I think this is one of the biggest public health breakthroughs in the last 50 years. Being able to change your lifestyle and get as healthy as you can in such a hurry is such a gift, and every single one of us should be out giving that gift at every opportunity. You know, give it to somebody else. Give that gift to somebody else. I gave my brother the mod I was using when I was down in San Diego. I was like, here you go, man. I was supposed to review it. I probably got in trouble for not reviewing it, but I gave it to my brother because he was still smoking. I handed it to him with a bottle of cinnamon roll e-liquid, and I was like, you won't go back once you start doing this. And he started vaping a little bit, and he's like, dude, this is so much better. Didn't smoke the rest of the time that I was down there. We should be handing out gifts and reaching out to people and changing people's minds. it's all about reaching out and taking those opportunities to educate people and to put that positive spin in their brain, because all they get on YouTube and Facebook and the news that they watch is the negative portion that they see. Mods blowing up in people's pockets, people blowing their jaws off from vaping. They don't see the positive side. They don't see the millions of people that have quit smoking at this point through vaping. I like to quote that the U.S. is at its lowest smoking percentage in history. And I like to think that a lot of that is due to vaping. I've said it before on my shows. It's the thing that's really heartbreaking to me, and the reason I'm going to keep doing this pretty much no matter what. I'll still keep teaching people how to make e-liquids out of their bathtub and mail people stuff and all sorts of things. Even if the FDA tells me I shouldn't be doing it and I can't do it, I'm still going to keep doing it because I want that information to be out there. I want someone to be able to walk into this that is coming off the streets as a smoker and they want to make that healthy life choice like I did. I want them to have that option. That's the thing that breaks my heart watching everything going on all over the world is they're taking it. A lot of places are taking it away from people just because of all the misconceptions and all the negativity that's been heaped onto it by outside parties. I won't get into conspiracy theories or anything like that on your podcast, but it's being taken away slowly but surely from the people that could benefit the most from it. I've already benefited from it. You've already benefited from it. All the vapors out there, probably the majority of folks who listen to this, they've already benefited from it. You could probably walk away within a month and be fine and never have to think about a cigarette again. You're free. You're flying free like the birds. It's those people that are behind us that we left behind, those smokers that aren't going to get the chance or it's going to be so difficult for them that I think we all need to keep fighting for. And that's what keeps me going. That's what keeps me fighting. I still want to do these live shows. I still want to teach people how to make e-liquids, even though I don't need any of this at this point. I don't need vaping at this point. I don't need 400 flavors sitting on a shelf back here. I don't need any of it. But there's somebody back behind me that could use it. And that's what's going to keep me going. That's why I'll keep doing this as long as I can.
I simply cannot express enough the amount of respect that I have for that man. Amazing individual, a massive influence to the vape community, and just an all-around amazing human being. Fresh, buddy, thank you very much for taking the time out to spend with me, to tell your story so that I can turn around and share it with the listeners of the Fogcast. An incredible story from an incredible man. Thank you very much again. Just make sure you stick around for the outro following Permit to Piss Me Off. On the exit of the show, you're going to be hearing a little bit more from Fresh as well. And if you want to help out the fight to save vaping, you can do so by heading over and picking up some of Fresh 03's monster creation, Addy's Yogurt, available at adoreeliquid.com. 100% of the proceeds go to notblowingsmoke.org, and while you're there, you can grab some banana bondage from Adore as well. 50% of those proceeds go to notblowingsmoke.org as well. And if you want to help advocacy and look cool, go over to vapingswag.com, pick yourself up a Fresh 03 I Vape I Vote t-shirt. Proceeds from that going to Not Blowing Smoke as well.
A permit to piss me off.
So this section that I have included in my weekly podcast entitled Permit to Piss Me Off. It's a segment for my Fogcast designed for me to have an opportunity to vent or express opinion on certain issues that we may have covered for a certain whatever episode. Over the last few weeks, there's been a lot of things take place in my personal life that have got me frustrated and I'm not thinking the way that I normally do, and I'm fighting to get back on track with the way that I normally carry myself. And if you could have heard the uncut, unedited version of this Fogcast, I think most of you would have been pretty disappointed in how I came across and how I spoke, the tone I used, the language I used. As I was recording, I was expressing my opinion on the topics I was discussing. And recently, I was on a show where I started going off on whose fault it is that the vaping community is in the state that it's in. And I was pulled into check by a good friend, Mr. Gizzard Stew. And after the show, after everybody had signed off, it was just him and I, and he explained himself as to why he interjected into the situation. And I quickly came to the realization that this is what good friends do. They see a certain pattern and they are quick to pull that person back into check to get them back on track of their way of thinking. Ever since I got involved with the advocacy end of the vaping community, which was something that I was very passionate about, more so than keeping up with the innovation and the juice making, the DIY aspect and such, I was more interested in what was going on around the world and why it's happening. And I eventually wanted to share my passion with the community, and Fresh and Gizzard gave me that opportunity to be a part of getting messages out to the community, to bring a good message out. And I thank them for that. I have the utmost respect for both of them and several others. Paul as well. Paul is another guy that I can sit down at any point in time and express my grievances, and he'll be quick to make you realize where you're seeing things wrong and which is a better way to look at it. And I thank him as well. I played with him a little bit with the introduction to his interview, but that's just how him and I and Gizzard and our little band of friends operate. We play jokes, we joke with each other. It's all in fun. You see, I was so appreciative of Mr. Fresh 03 taking the time out of his busy life, a good 2 hours, to sit down with me and give me the opportunity to share his story with my Fogcast listeners. Then I went back to edit this episode that I had recorded, and I was really and thoroughly disappointed in myself for the way I had carried myself. So if it came across somewhat choppy and whatnot, it's because of the editing that I had to do. It was very difficult to re-record the entire thing, so it sounds kind of choppy at spots. Yeah, we're all getting to, we all reach a certain anger level with what's going on. We're getting walked on by governments and organizations, and they're stepping on something that we believe and we know is a better way of life. And it's unfortunate. We have the right as human beings to improve the quality of our lives, and we're doing so through vaping. It's far safer and far healthier than cigarette smoking, but they're just pulling it away from us without any input. We don't get to speak our voices, and it's getting frustrating. But you see, the world does operate that way. It operates by the laws of cause and effect. And I've always carried myself in a cool, calm, collective kind of manner, and I've always prided myself on that. I've prided myself on the fact that I've adapted that from guys like Fresh and from Gizzard. There's no need to go out and be angry and promote anger. It's how the world works. It's laws of cause and effect. If I'm out there and radiating negativity and anger, it's going to make everybody around me feel the same way. But if I do it in a positive manner and in such a way that it keeps people calm and understanding, then that's what I need to do, and that's what I need to continue to do. That's what I've done to this point. So I can't allow somebody like Fresh to come on my show and override his incredible story with a bunch of F-bombs and ranting and raving. It's not going to help the situation any. My goal is to educate and to advocate and to make as many aware of the fight that we're enduring right now. That's my rant for this week. I'm ranting about myself. I'm ranting about how disappointed I am in myself. But I thank friends like Gizzard and Fresh and Paul to pull me back into check and to get me back on track, so I am Permit the Fog that everybody knows and has a certain amount of respect for. Thanks very much for taking the time to listen to this epic episode this week. Fantastic guests, Paul and Fresh. Can't thank you guys enough. And we look forward to next week's episode. We're going to hear some more from Paul, and there's a good possibility that we may have some interaction with the Vaping Bogan out of Australia as well. And we're going to have a great guest for My Vaping Story next week as well. Thanks very much, everybody. Appreciate you listening. Here's a little bit more Fresh 03 for you.
The advocacy stuff, we're getting to the point where there's, every dollar that we donate is a drop in the bucket compared to what is going to be needed. And it's helpful for people to go out and to donate and to continue to buy stuff like Addy's yogurt or banana bondage from Adore, or get the sweet I Vape I Vote shirts from Vaping Swag. It's helpful to do things like that, to donate your money to CASA or Sebia or the Right to Be Smoke-Free lawsuit like Hetty's doing with his e-liquid. But the most important thing we have right now is education, because there's so much negativity attached to vaping right now, and it's completely undeserved. Being able to change your lifestyle and get as healthy as you can in such a hurry is such a gift, and every single one of us should be out giving that gift at every opportunity. It's all about reaching out and taking those opportunities to educate people and to put that positive spin in their brain, because all they get on YouTube and Facebook and the news that they watch is the negativity and the negative portion that they see. They don't see the positive side. They don't see the millions of people that have quit smoking at this point through vaping. Keep it positive. Be respectful. You don't have to get angry at people, even though they might be making you angry. You don't have to get angry with them. Their anger is their problem. I'd like to say, everybody be beautiful to each other.